This week in the fourth quarter pod, we have the Prince of Pickleball, the CEO of the number one pickleball app and platform in the world, Max Aid, the CEO of Pickleheads. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, Max.
I love it. I love it. It's so funny. That sounded like a little Jason Calacanis coming out right there. Um,
Ollie, we're coming for you.
aspiring. Here we go.
I love it. I love it. Max, before we kick off, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I, out of school, or when I was getting ready to graduate in Atlanta, the Atlanta Hawks launched a venture fund called Hawks Ventures. And I basically wanted to work there. And I cold emailed the two investors there on sports tech startups in Atlanta that they should be investing in. And I did that because I just literally Googled hot sports tech startups in Atlanta, and I started diving deep into Pickleheads. Sent the email, didn't think they'd respond. They ended up responding, and they were like, "Can you put us in touch with Max or Pickleheads or whoever runs that?" And then I didn't know you, I didn't know anybody at Pickleheads, so I sent you a cold LinkedIn DM, and you ended up responding, and we've built a great relationship. And fast forward a couple years, and now you're on the pod. So it's been a cool journey.
That story does not surprise me at all, because you're a hustler, and I've seen that from the time that you first reached out to me. I think like I'm always on the lookout for people like you. Like it's a rare breed, people that hustle like that, especially right out of college and super entrepreneurial and trying to meet people and trying to get involved in cool projects. So that does not surprise me at all.
Well, that makes me feel really good, and I appreciate you, and I'm glad I have you in my corner. But Max, to kick things off, I wanted to let our audience know more about who you are as a person. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of your background and your career journey so far?
Sure, yeah. So as you said, I run a pickleball startup, which is probably the most fun day job that you can have. It gets in the way of me playing pickleball. So I only get to play, 2 to 3 times a week instead of every day. But it's a worthy sacrifice to be able to work on consumer tech. And yeah, I'll just give you the quick backstory. So, I was always entrepreneurial growing up. And I think I realized that this is what I wanted to do with my life towards the tail end of college. Started a college startup, got involved in some early startups in Boston, ended up out in San Francisco, spent a few years at Google with some of the guys I worked with at Google. We built some really big businesses there together. Left that, had a another business. It was a marketplace business called Growth Collective. Um, Sold that business a few years in, and I think, the big takeaway from that experience was there are a lot of really interesting business ideas that can be good businesses, but you have to really love what you're doing. And I know people say that and it sounds super cliche, but you can go a long way into the startup journey before you hit that really rough patch. And it's hard to get over that hump if you don't really love it. And I think what I realized, I was 2 years into Growth Collective. It was profitable, it was growing. We had great growth numbers. I hated it. I hated doing B2B like sales and a B2B marketplace. I was like, what am I doing? And so I ended up, I was lucky. It was 2021. There was a lot of money flying around in 2021, if you remember. And I was lucky enough to find a buyer for the business that I really liked and kind of wiped my hands clean of it and spent a lot of time thinking, like, what do I actually love doing? I had spent prior to that most of my career in consumer tech, marketing and growth type work. And I said, I want to get back into that. I instead of connecting people, Growth Collective was connecting marketing talent with companies. I wanted to do the marketing myself. And so um, I was spending a lot of time on the pickleball court at the time. And it was just incredible some of the things I was seeing in terms of the diversity of people playing it, the age range, every type of athletic ability, and then just the amount of energy there was behind the sport. I thought there's probably something here. And the more I looked into it, the stats were incredible. There really wasn't a lot of technology in the space. That was kind of the beginning of Pickleheads.
Max, that's awesome to hear. Sid and I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the core features of Pickleheads. Can you tell us exactly what Pickleheads does?
Yeah, so Pickleheads is, like you mentioned, it's the number one app for recreational pickleball players. The average player is just getting out and playing in their community. So we do a bunch of different things. We help you find places to play, then we connect you with the people who play there. We have a whole suite of tools then to help organize games at your skill level. And then finally, when you get out on the court, we have this insane round robin tool so you can actually run competitions and structure your games out on the court.
That's super interesting. Max, like, how did you even go about? I think maybe some features seemed obvious to build in a consumer pickleball app, but when you were first playing in your like local pickleball community and maybe in your neighborhood or something, what specific pain points or how did you go about building these specific features for pickleheads?
Yeah, I mean, so what's been really fun about this experience as an entrepreneur, like I love just solving problems, and things get boring for me once things are really predictable and we have a process for everything and we have a team for everything, right? Like you guys know what I'm talking about. The thing about pickleball is it's an emerging market and it's changing so quickly. So you flash back to early 2022, which is when we were just getting started. There was no dedicated pickleball courts for me within 10 miles, probably, maybe more. So all of the pickleball courts were either tennis courts with lines and you had to bring your own net. Some of them you'd show up and there was a net on site, but you'd have to roll it out. There were other things that were like a basketball court that is used for all kinds of things, but during certain hours you could play pickleball. There were people literally taping lines in their driveway, right? So like the types of courts, finding a court was the scarce resource, and there were all these types of courts. And so if you did a search on Google for pickleball court, it wasn't going to show any of this. It was just going to show the permanent courts. So the first thing we built was a court finder, and we included all of these different things, and we hired a research team, and that was going out and like categorizing these things and finding images for them. Spent just an incredible amount of work and time and money building this free resource for players. And that wasn't all charity. We knew that free court finder was going to be a magnet for players and it was going to bring in a bunch of organic traffic. And we also knew that what we ended up building was probably not going to be something that we could just use paid acquisition for, right? So like there are some products like a movie ticket or something or like whatever, right? Like it's a booking of some kind. You can drive an ad to that booking and they make the transaction right there. And you can grow an entire paid funnel off of that and you can have an entire business that's just paid acquisition. Growth Collective was an example of this. We had all paid acquisition for many years on Growth Collective to drive leads and it was all profitable. I had a feeling with pickleball, if I wanted to have like millions of players in a consumer facing app, that I wasn't going to go out and pay for every one of those users. That just that was not going to be ROI positive. So we had to find an organic customer acquisition channel. If you look back in history at like HubSpot created the website grader. It was this amazing free tool. I think it still exists. You could put in your domain and it would tell you all the things that were wrong with your website and all the things that you could do. But it was lead generation for their other products. And so that's what the Court Finder was. It was our first product. It solved the biggest problem in pickleball at the time. And it was a free tool that drove customer acquisition for everything that we would build after that. And so you think about like phase one of the company was free acquisition, free traffic generation, essentially, and a court finder experience that helped you find places to play. And about a year into it, we said, okay, we need to do two things. Number one, we can't just have traffic. Like that's not a business. We need to like do more than have traffic. We need people creating accounts. That's how you accrue long-term value from the traffic. And then number two is if I'm a player and I'm looking for a place to play, I'm not actually, I might search like places to play pickleball in Atlanta, but what I'm actually looking for are people to play with. Like I want to like play. I don't want to just find a court. And so what we realize is like we actually need to go and find schedule information, we need game information. And so that's what we started to layer on is all the schedule information and tools for organizing games. There's now a third phase of Pickleheads, which we're just kind of entering, which is the sport has changed again. And what's happened this time is that in 2022, 2023, people that started playing pickleball this sport went from obscurity to like one of the largest activities in the country in like 2 years, right? So year one and two, everybody is new to the sport. And the most common way of playing pickleball was to go out to these open play events and just mix and match partners. Social, it's fun, everyone's having a good time. But now imagine that those cohorts have aged 2 to 3 years. They've been playing pickleball 5 days a week because pickleball players are psychos and they just can't get enough. They're really good, right? Like they're not beginners anymore. And so if you look at the spectrum of skill levels across the sport, it's not all concentrated as beginner and low intermediate. It's spread out among all different skill levels. Well, it turns out that if you've been playing for 2 to 3 years and you're a 4-0 player, it's not a lot of fun to play against somebody who's never played before. You will win 11-0 and they will be demoralized and you will not have a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
And so skill level has become so important. So what we're doing now is we have the largest network of rec players and we have all skill levels for everybody. And we're giving people tools to invite people to games at their skill level. And then instead of having these unstructured open play events where everyone mixes in with everyone, we have technology that says, hey, add a little bit of structure, seed the players. We'll automatically tell you what court to put everybody on. Put the scores in, we'll mix it back up. You lose a game, you get an easier one. You win a game, you get a harder one. And so we're helping people have confidence that when they show up on the court, that they're going to have good competitive games.
Max, I have a quick follow up on the skill based matchmaking. What are like the specific metrics or KPIs that you're going to track for a lot of these existing picklehead users, but also maybe new users that might actually be very skilled, but might get pooled with lower skilled players just based on the fact that they don't have that many games under their belt.
Yeah, and this has honestly been the biggest issue in pickleball has been ratings. There are two, there are more than two, but it's really coalesced around two rating systems. There's Duper, and there's UTR. UTR is the rating system in tennis.
Mm-hmm.
They have a pickleball rating system called UTRP. And then Duper is people who used to work at UTR that came into pickleball and started a pickleball specific rating system. It's been interesting to watch this play out. We're in an interesting position where we're kind of objective, right? We're just looking at what do people ask us for? Like, or do they asking us for a Duper integration, asking for a UTR integration? What do organizers want? And we also have the data on how many users put in each of these ratings into their Pickleheads profiles. It seems like Duper is going to win this race from what we're seeing, right? That is just like from what we're seeing. It could change, but that's what we're seeing right now. And so what we're focused on right now is how do we help as many players as possible get a Duper rating? I want to get a rating, but I want to get a rating in the right setting. And if I just go to a get rated event and I'm mixed in with a bunch of random levels, I might go 0 for 5 and like because I get bad partners that are different levels than me and my rating's low or whatever, right? Or I'm playing against people that are lower ratings and so my rating is lower. And so that's a really hard problem that you have to solve, is just that first time when you get a rating, that being accurate. And so what we're doing is we're talking to the folks over at Duper, and they have a partnership with a company called My Pickleball Coach, which is now called My Duper Coach, where you can kind of give someone a provisional Duper rating, and then you can run a round robin on Pickleheads, and you can sort of submit all this information at once and get somebody an accurate rating, even though they don't have a ton of games. And that allows you then to say, all right, now all of us have a rating. Now we can confidently run some round robins and on a weekly basis and start to submit rated games into the rating system. But skill level is absolutely going to become more important for everything. And I think organizing games will actually get easier when everybody has an accurate rating.
I love it. I love it. Do you remember as you were building this, Max, the moment you guys found product market fit?
It's so funny. I mean, we have a lot of products, right? So like we're constantly finding product market fit again and again with new products. And then we're also I believe that product market fit is more of a spectrum than binary. Just those are two caveats, but I'll just tell you one story that is kind of funny. I remember when we first put the Court Finder website up there, and we weren't doing anything to promote it. You know, it existed. It didn't look good yet. Like we were not ready to tell people that this even was on the internet. And but we did have like a user login functionality, and we also had a follow court button. And if you wanted to follow the court, you had to like create an account. Following the court did nothing at this point. Like literally just like follow the court. Like later on, we'll find a reason why you should follow the court. And I remember like one of the first days after we pushed this live, like a random Slack notification, like like Suzanne like signed up, and I'm like, oh, that must be somebody's like aunt or something, right? You know, you start thinking the two, you're like, who knows this woman? There's no way this is a random stranger. And that, nope, turned out just random stranger. And then it ping, 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 like it just started to happen, right?
Um,
And so that was a really cool feeling. Just even though it was really early and all that, but just to feel that pull from the market of man, people really want this stuff. Like people really want to connect with other pickleball players and get out on the court. And they really are looking for something like this. That was pretty motivating.
Max, that's an awesome story. Honestly, it's a little bit when me and Sid, when we started our newsletter, it was like awesome to see that one person you didn't know subscribe. There's like no other feeling that can replicate that. Um, Max, I wanted to touch a little bit about, how big the market is. When me and Sid were doing our diligence on, how big Pickleheads is in America, we saw some actually awesome stats, and it was brought to you by Pickleheads, Pickleheads blog/newsletter. And I'm going to read them off right now because I think the audience would love this. 36.5 million people play pickleball in the US right now. It's growing more than 200% past 3 years. And this is actually a crazy one. $900 million of spend is going to be needed to build all these dedicated courts just to meet demand in the next 5 years. So there's a real market here. But one thing you mentioned is when you started, pickleball wasn't as big as it is now. Obviously, you were able to get a first few users, organically that came across your court finder. But what were some strategies that Pickleheads use to really get those first users and get the ball rolling?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the sport is exploding, and that's like a whole topic in and of itself. I actually think it's going to become this big internationally too. I don't think there's enough people talking about that, but there's something like really human about pickleball, and like like we literally sit on our phones all day.
mhm.
We're talking on Zoom right now. Like a few years ago, we would have done this in person. We would have like flown to each other and done this podcast, right? It seems absurd now, but we're all sitting in our comfy little homes, and after work, we're gonna go and we're gonna stare at more screens. We're gonna watch some Netflix or whatever, right? People, we just have this innate desire to be around other people in the real world, and that is like totally lacking right now from the way we live our daily lives. Pickleball is the exact opposite of all the other trends. Like every trend is going towards being by yourself and staring at a screen, and pickleball is going the other direction. That's why it's exploding. And I think people put it in the bucket of sports. This is not really a sport phenomenon. This is a social phenomenon that's happening.
Interesting.
People can take their paddle by themselves, show up to a court, play with a bunch of strangers that they've never met before, and have a good time and laugh and be outside and be around people and meet new people. That is so incredible, right? Like that is something we all want more of. And so that is where this growth is coming from. I think it's important to identify where it's coming from. And I know we were talking, I was talking about the skill level thing earlier. One of the reasons why this is so important and why Brandon and I spent so much time thinking about this is if you don't solve the skill level problem, you're going to destroy that part of pickleball, the magic, and it will end the trend if we're not careful. Because open play right now is the most magical part of pickleball. It's the social, welcoming, beginner friendly experience. And if you're going to have that still in a world where everyone's different skill levels, you need a little bit of structure, you need a little bit of technology. So that's what we're trying to add. Um, so I know this is that was a bit of a tangent there. Do you want to repeat the second part of what you said?
Yeah, for sure. So, I know that you mentioned that when you first started, pickleball wasn't as big as it is now. And obviously it's become this social phenomenon in like, as 2024, 2025. When you first started, what were some strategies that pickleheads use?
Oh, right, right.
Maybe like, inorganically, whether it's like, or, just going to like pickleball tournaments, etc., meeting with people around your community. Was there any like particular strategies that you were using to like, get the word out there that there is a tool that can be used to, form these pickleball communities?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, so I'm a marketer. If you look back kind of before all this, I've done a lot of marketing in my career. So I always think about what you would call channel product fit. Like we've all heard of product market fit, right? Channel product fit is like, what is my marketing channel that like fits with the product that I'm building? And for some businesses, it's paid ads on a specific type of paid ad. Like every single event ticket business, it's paid search. That's it. There's nothing else. That is it. Right. And so like depending on what you're selling, there's a specific channel for it. For us, we saw really early that SEO was the game. And so rather than spread our efforts out and do a little bit of a lot of things, we just went all in on SEO, all in, completely focused on that one channel to the detriment of many other things. You'll go to our social pages and you'll be like, what is going on over here? There's like nothing on our social media profiles, right? But we can do that later. Like we had to have that one acquisition channel. But I think the other thing that we did is we just got out and played a lot of pickleball. And that was in terms of separately from the marketing and the acquisition, just in terms of building the right product, that's been the key is like getting out there, using the product ourselves, talking to organizers, talking to players, figuring out what people like, figuring out what people don't like about the product, and then iterating as quickly as we can. So that has been the key. And we're going as far this year as hosting our own events. So, like, we're going to use our round robin tool and just make
Nice.
epic programming, skill based programming happen all over the country ourselves, um, while at the same time recruiting other people to go and use our suite of tools. But we don't want that to be a blocker.
That's awesome. Um, I'm curious, obviously you think pickleball is going to be big. I think a lot of skeptics and criticism, Max, to have some pushback here, think it's more of a fad or a trend. And there's some internal beef within the sports community between tennis players and pickleball players. Maybe that's quelling a little bit now, but what do you see this sport and kind of like this industry kind of blossoming into? Do you think it could become a tennis like thing? Do you think it'll be a middle market kind of capped at a certain uh, kind of just like ceiling type of kind of sport, or how are you thinking about some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to be the largest sport in the world. And the The reason is there's a few reasons. So, like I said before, this isn't just a sport. This is like a social phenomenon. That's really important because, and I'll just tell you a quick story. The first time I played pickleball, it was Christmas holidays. Me and my wife went to Tulsa. She grew up in Tulsa, and at the time I was playing a lot of tennis, and so my father-in-law had purchased some tennis rackets and some pickleball paddles, and he's like, "We're gonna entertain Max by like playing some tennis and pickleball or whatever." And so we went out there, and the first thing we tried to do was play tennis. And I'm hitting a tennis ball with them for about 2 minutes before I realized like this isn't gonna work. Like nobody knows how to swing a tennis racket, and like it's not gonna be fun for me who plays tennis a lot, to go out and try to teach them how to play. If you want to learn how to play tennis, you got to take 10 lessons just to be somewhat competent. And even so, you're not going to like all of a sudden go play with like your friends who have been playing tennis their whole lives. Like there's such a massive skill level variance in tennis, and there's such a massive learning curve in tennis. The same is true of golf,
Hmm.
soccer, almost every other sport. Pickleball is not like that. So we went out there, we gave up on tennis, we went over, the pickleball courts were right next door. We went over to the pickleball courts and we start messing around. And we played for 4 hours. And then we came back the next day. And then we came back the next day. And then we came back the next day. And at one point I'm looking around and there's a 12-year-old and then there's somebody in their 70s.
Mm.
And we're all playing totally different athletic abilities as well. Like some had never picked up any type of paddle or racket, never played ping pong their whole life, right? And then, I love that stuff. I've played all of the racket sports my whole life. And we're all out there together on the court. We're having a great time. I'm pretty sure, by the way, we didn't know the kitchen rules. I'm pretty sure I was just standing up at the net and just swatting balls away, right?
Freestyling.
We're trying to teach ourselves how to play. But that's a perfect example of the accessibility of the sport. Okay, so that explains the growth curve. But when people call it a fad, really what the question is the stickiness there or not?
Hmm.
Are people all going out and trying this? Is it like a VR headset where you try pickleball and you're like, that was fun. That was really fun. And then you never you never do it again. And that is just not what I've seen. It's actually wild. Like I remember when we first started the company, I was playing myself a normal amount, and I just assumed that I had some assumptions. Like here's one of my assumptions was like people probably play once or twice a week. Seems reasonable, right? People probably buy one paddle. Like these are like simple basic things you would assume, right?
Hmm.
I get out there and I start talking to people, and it's more like people play 5 to 7 times a week. Some people play twice a day. Like people don't buy one paddle. People buy a new paddle every 2 months. Like it is crazy what like when you see the intensity of the addiction that people have for this thing and the frequency that they're out on the court, and that's when you're like, ooh, like this is a good product. And I'll tell you what, like there are a lot of reasons why we started this company, but it was that it was those characteristics that made us really excited because we felt like the pickleball as a product is the perfect product. And so then you say, okay, well, great, it's going to be big in the US, but is it going to be international? It's like, why would it not be international? If people want a social, accessible sport activity, let's call it, it's going to spread everywhere.
Hmm.
It's already spread to Canada, which is right there. It's spreading in Southeast Asia. It's about to blow up in China. It's growing all over the world. So for that reason, I think that this is just going to be an absolutely massive market.
Yeah, Max, Dubai just had a big pickleball conference too that you were at. So we're getting some other money, some international money coming in the sport. Now I agree with you. I see it.
Max, on the topic of, going internationally, do you think like professional pickleball is going to be like, the media outlet for it to spread to like other countries that haven't really seen what pickleball is. That way there's like some sort of limelight, sponsorships, etc., that brings more attraction to people, who never even knew what pickleball was.
There's a lot of people that are betting on that thesis. I personally am not. I think pickleball is a bottoms up phenomena, not a
Mhm.
top down one. When you're a kid and you decide to start playing t-ball, it's because you're watching, your team on TV with your dad, and you're like, I want to play baseball one day, Dad, and he's like, okay, we'll sign you up for t-ball. That's how you start playing t-ball.
Mhm.
You don't start running because you watch Olympic marathons. Like, I mean, maybe some people do, but most people don't start running for that reason, right? And maybe they eventually, as a diehard runner, get really into watching the professional sport. But most people, the average runner, that's not the case. Pickleball, in my opinion, is more like running and cycling in that respect. It is, the foundation of it is that casual social play and activity in their local community. That's the magic of it. And that's how people get drawn in by other people in their community. They're like, hey, you got to come out and play with us. It's so fun. You're going to love it. Not so much watching it on TV. All that said, I would love for pro pickleball to be successful. There's a lot of really smart people that are working on that, and I hope they succeed. I think there's potentially even an angle where gets that seeds the rec game in some new markets.
Mhm.
But I am more bullish on leading with the rec game.
Suraj, that's actually like a super interesting analogy. We haven't thought about it like that. We agree with you, Max. I think just the natural highlights of pickleball aren't as exciting to the doom scrollers on social media to like garner their attention. But yeah,
Well, the highlights are pretty fun sometimes. Like, I think the challenge is actually the opposite, like getting people to watch the full matches. The highlights are amazing because people can see themselves in the highlights. But one thing that we did at Pickleheads that I thought was cool is like in all the other pickleball newsletters were showing pro highlights all the time. We said let's show amateur highlights, like let's show rec highlights.
smart.
And so we started doing that, and people love it. People submit that stuff to us, and we now have the largest pickleball newsletter by far. But all the other newsletters have now copied us. They're all doing rec highlights now because it's so fun to see that.
Max, actually, on that note, I've been thinking about this. Celebrity boxing actually got people into boxing. Maybe celebrities playing pickleball, like we see David Dobrik, post on his Snapchat story of him playing pickleball, and he's a great tennis player, which makes him an even greater, pickleball player. And honestly, that could be a cool like distribution strategy. Maybe throwing like a cool like celebrity pickleball tournament and seeing them posted on socials.
Definitely. And a few people have done those and they have been successful. And obviously you guys have seen the Michelob Ultra Super Bowl commercial that just aired. There's a lot of brand advertising and large kind of awareness type things happening right now, and I think that's all good for the sport. Obviously, make pickleball a household name, make everyone kind of put it in their mind that they should go try it. I think that's all great for driving like general growth in participation.
Love it. Well,
Uh,
Max, one of the things that we didn't get to just yet in the beginning was your your fundraise. Pickleheads is fresh off a $2.5 million seed round. Congrats, by the way. Um,
Thanks.
Siraj was really excited to ask you this, so I'm gonna let him ask you this question.
Yeah, I mean, someone who's always been interested in VC, but it's always great to understand the founder's perspective on things. You've raised 2.5 million. Also, want to say congratulations from some of the top VCs, KD's 35V, among many others. You've also had experience in raising 750K for a pre-seed round. We're curious, just from the founder's lens, how does that fundraising process look like, and your insights on like how to run that process for any startup founders who are listening and tuning in right now.
Woo,
AKA me.
man, I've got some
AKA
I've got
Sid.
some thoughts. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've been involved in startups for many years, but most of them were bootstrapped. I was at a startup studio that was bootstrapped. My last company, we went through Techstars. We got a little money from them, but we didn't raise money and we got to profitability. But I mentioned earlier that we spent an entire year with Pickleheads locking down customer acquisition with organic search and building free tools for players in order to build up those network effects. That wasn't something that could be bootstrapped. That was not a quick to revenue idea. This was, we're going for it. And that required some investment. So, yeah, we raised that early pre seed round. Some learnings that I've had along the way. Number one, I think angels are a great mechanism for fundraising, especially for consumer things like if you're in sports tech, you should absolutely be looking at angels because when people can use your product and talk about your product and people understand what they're saying, that's a good opportunity for an angel investor, right? Like a lot of angel investors, they're trying to get involved with fun companies that they're in spaces they're excited about. And so from the get-go, we've had a lot of success with angels. A lot of them use our product, play pickleball, etc. We did this round. We actually set up an AngelList RUV. This is I can't believe I didn't realize this product existed for our first round. I would have used it. But with an RUV, you can basically set up an entity and take investment into that entity, and then that entity invests onto your cap table. So your cap table, you just have one line item, and you can get as many investors as you want essentially into this RUV at any check size. So people can literally write $1,000 check, or they can write $100,000 check into your RUV. And this is so good for so many reasons. You don't realize this when you first start your company and you're just collecting safe investments. Oh, it's easy. I'll send you the safe. You sign it, wire me the money. It's done. Great. The problem is in 2 years, you're going to raise another round and you're going to need to get their signature on a bunch of stuff. So you're advised, which is the correct advice, not to go get 50 people on your cap table. You got to go chase down 50 signatures, right? So what AngelList allows you to do with these RUVs is to invest, get money from a lot of people. And that in turn creates all of these advocates for your brand. And especially in our case, getting a ton of pickleball players on our cap table is a really good thing. It helps with hiring. It helps with just general awareness about the brand. So we were actually able to do that, and we now have over 100 angels as investors in Pickleheads, which is amazing. We have two MLP teams that are investors as well. So we also went the strategic route and got some pickleball specific investors. And then we have absolutely loved working with Overline. They ended up leading this round. They're an Atlanta based seed fund here in the Southeast. They're honestly one of the only groups that's actually taking bets across every type of business model. What I'm seeing in the market right now is a lot of people that are just following what everyone else is doing, right? A lot of VCs that are saying, "Great, let's invest in AI." Like, "Great, let's invest in vertical SaaS." Don't get me wrong. You should absolutely, if you're a VC, be investing in AI. I'm not saying you should not be investing in AI. But my point is, like, those are consensus views among VCs, right?
Mhm.
And what there aren't a lot of right now are VCs that are willing to say, hey, like, this is an interesting new emerging market. We don't know how it's going to get monetized, but this is a really interesting company that is going out and grabbing market share. And if you look back at all the big winners, over the last 20 years, most of them were considered too small in terms of a TAM perspective, really like a net new market that was being created. And so it was a non-obvious, non-consensus bet that the VCs were taking. So I got to give Overline, Ardent, a lot of our early investors a lot of credit for being willing to bet on us before we had any of the traction that we have today. And in a moment where the TAM was completely unknown as well.
Shout out to Overline and Ardent. That's awesome. Max, I mean, like, I think people read the highlights saying you guys raised 2.5 million in the seed round, 750K in the pre-seed. But what were some of the lowlights or kind of the biggest hesitations when you were pitching VCs on Pickleheads?
The biggest hesitation, well, I mean, by far, so here's the thing. We went into this with a very specific strategy. Like one day I'll probably write a book on this topic, and I call it like distribution first. Okay. In my opinion, the normal way people build products is they say, let me build a product for like 3 people. And if they like it, then I'll move on to the next thing and I'll build like a better version of it and I'll get a little bit of revenue traction. And then I'll have, let's say, 100K in ARR and I'll go and I'll raise my round. One of the problems with doing that is you have yet to figure out what is one of the most important things to a startup, which is that channel market fit I alluded to earlier.
Mhm.
So you have not figured out how you are going to repeatedly acquire customers profitably. And we all know gazillion examples of where that never ended up happening, right? Like companies raised a lot of money, spent $1.20 to make 80 cents, and like that they could never make the economics work, and they never had that acquisition channel. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of some startups where we didn't think about it that way, where we started with acquisition and we actually built our way into product. And so that's how we approached Pickleheads. We started by building up the SEO. And we knew if we have all of this search traffic coming to us, we will then be able to figure out what these players want and start to layer on products. And then after we do that, we'll then be able to figure out how to monetize those products. There are not that many examples historically of products that have great usage, but like could just never be monetized, right? Usually people are able to figure this stuff out in terms of business model. The problem is when you invert that process like we did and you start with distribution, when you have a bunch of distribution traction, but you don't have a bunch of revenue traction, um, you just don't line up with the cookie cutter approach to evaluating metrics, right? Well, we're used to seeing 1 million in ARR or whatever, right? One of our early rounds, we went out to market and people were like, like, oh yeah, but like, you haven't monetized it yet. And it's like, of course not. Like, why, like but look at what we've done on distribution. Like, we have all the traffic. Like, that's inevitable. We're going to get there. And so that disconnect, I think, has hurt us from a fundraising standpoint. I still think it was the right move for the business. And again, it was a bit of zagging when everyone else was zigging. If you look at the competitive landscape in pickleball, we have outright won the court finder segment of the market. Everyone else went for the quick to revenue opportunities. And now we're coming back and revisiting some of those things, but we have all this distribution to do it and all this momentum and all these players. And so, anyways, that would be how I would describe our fundraising journey. But we have obviously enough traction to convince some people to take a bet on us, and we did get the round done, and we're stoked about the next phase here.
That's sweet.
Max, that anecdote or kind of that explanation reminds me of that scene in Social Network when Sean Parker, Eduardo, and Mark are like having a conversation. They're like, "Hey, like Eduardo, like you want to do ads, right?" And they're like, Sean's like, "No,
Yeah.
don't do ads because if you do ads, it's like shutting down the party an hour in, right? Like you don't even know what it is yet." And I think that strategy just honestly always works, especially for direct to consumer. I'm glad you guys did that.
Yeah.
Max, um, you know, now that you've raised money, I feel like, it's kind of funny. It's more like when the party starts, right? You're about to, build out your team, really grow just like the pickle heads. Like, you know, can I call you guys pickleheads? I'm going to say growing the
Oh yeah.
pickleheads. Um, Obviously this is a super important decision to make when it comes to hiring. What are the characteristics that you're looking at for your next, key hires?
No, I mean, like, look, we're early stage startups. It's a unique thing. I was the first hire at two different startups, and it's hard. It's a grind, and it is unlike any other type of job. You're doing a lot of the same type of work that a founder does. You're solving problems. You're going way well outside your scope. You're doing a little bit of everything. You know, people say like you wear multiple hats. I don't think that does like a full job of explaining it because there's a level of uncertainty in an early stage startup. And you have to be okay with that. You have to embrace that because where there's uncertainty, there's also an opportunity to be creative, right? We've all been in jobs at large companies where there's no opportunity to be creative. You are given a very narrow role and you just need to do what people have already figured out in the past and told you that you need to do. And so this is the complete opposite side of the spectrum where there's uncertainty and there's anxiety and it requires a lot of grit and um, especially because we're a remote team, we're looking for people who are willing to get their hands dirty, get in there and do what needs to be done to will things into existence when things need to happen. That's hard to find. It's hard to find, and it's hard to know somebody is going to thrive in that environment unless they've been in it before. And usually, the people who've been in it before are already off doing their own startup. You know, one other thing I'll mention about this, because this
Sure.
is just on the same topic, is like at an early stage startup, there are no full-time managers. You know, like I'm not a full-time manager. Brand is not a full-time manager. Everybody has to do stuff themselves with their hands. And I really like that because I think we have this culture in tech of promoting our best performers out of the role that they're really good at. Like if I always think about like a person back in the day like would learn a craft, you know? Like let's say they were the one that was like making the swords. And like they got really good at making swords, right? Like can you imagine if like after like 2 years they're like getting pretty good and then you're like, "All right, stop making swords. You're now the manager of the sword making." Like you no longer manage swords any make any swords anymore. It's like that makes no sense. But we've glorified that in tech. And so if you go work at a large tech company, your first role will be hands-on. You know, when I was at Google, my first role was like in AdWords accounts, talking to advertisers, helping them figure stuff out. I was learning a lot about their business, about the ad accounts, about how paid ads worked and attribution and analytics and all this stuff.
Mhm.
But within like 2 years, they're like, all right, you're a manager now. Like, yeah, you don't talk to customers anymore. Like, you know, you're not in ad accounts. Like, your job now is to like look at a dashboard of the people that are in the ad accounts and then sit in meetings all day and talk about the people and how they're doing. And then sit in one-on-ones every day and check in with them and like ask them how they're doing. Look, there's nothing wrong with this. It's a great cushy job, but like I personally, I want to get good at stuff. I want to try new things. I want to learn new skills all the time. And so being in an early stage startup gives you that opportunity to actually build a craft and then to build a new craft. And after a while, what you'll realize is you know a whole lot about bookkeeping, you know a lot about building a sales motion, you know a lot about customer acquisition, you're a product manager. Shit, like with, you know, you're even in ChatGPT trying to debug, issues that come up. That's the life of being in an early stage startup. And so if that is appealing to you, that's the kind of person that we're looking for to join us at Pickleheads.
That's super exciting if you're a young person, and something I'm thinking about, and Siraj is thinking about as well, actively in like our respective careers. And Max, like the last kind of question I have for you is related to this. You have some really strong opinions on the topic of risk and young people not taking enough of it in today's day and age. Can you kind of elaborate and give some advice for somebody, young or old, who wants to take that leap into that risk or dream that they want to pursue?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. And if I could put together a formula of like what equals success, And I think everyone knows that your natural ability is like one variable, right? Some people are just brilliant. It's like 10 out of 10, brilliant. And then I think we all learn over time that like it's not just about your natural ability, it's actually also about how hard you work. So that's like the second number, right? 10 out of 10, I'm really smart. 10 out of 10, I work hard. That equals 100. There's a lot of people that are hundreds. There's a lot of great doctors and lawyers and consultants. They're all going to make lots of money in their career by being smart and working hard. But there's a third number that you can add to your formula, which is risk. And 10 times 10 times 10 is a whole lot more than 100, right? It's like, and I think people miss this. If you look at like all the most successful people in the world, they're all entrepreneurs in some way. They all took some risk because there's only so far you can get by just working hard and just by being smart. You've got to take risk. So then it comes down to like, all right, how do you take risk? How do you put yourself in a position to take risk? And when do you take risk? And I can remember like in my 20s, I would see all these like 18-year-olds getting into like Y Combinator. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why is Y Combinator letting these kids into Y Combinator? Like, this doesn't make any sense. I was
Mhm.
like, man, I'm applying, like, I've got experience. Like, why aren't they letting me in? I totally get it now. I completely understand now. The best time to take risk and the time when you're in a position to take the most risk is actually in your 20s. It's not in your 30s and 40s. By the time you get into your 30s, your lifestyle has inflated. You might be married. You might have kids. Definitely by the time you're in your 40s. And so it gets harder and harder as you go on to take risk. I don't think people realize that. They think, well, if I gain experience, then it will be less risky when I go and do a startup. But the problem is that your life leaves less room over time to take risk. So you're actually in a better position when you're 22 and you don't have any experience yet, per se, experience, because you learn most of it on the job, because you can take all the risk in the world. You can live on a cot in like some cheap place and like get paid almost nothing, and you have no dependents and no spouse, and you could just focus completely on your business. You could work 7 days a week if you wanted. So the people I see that I look back on now that have been the most successful, that kind of started where I started career wise, are the people who just took a plunge in their early to mid 20s, and they got their businesses really going with just an insane amount of work that would be impossible for them today in their mid 30s or 40s, and they became really successful. Um, The other thing that I think changes is that when you have no experience, you come out of college, you're like, you're excited about, you're actually naive, really is what it is. You're completely naive about the ideas you're pursuing, but you pursue really ambitious ideas. And I'll just give you an example. So when I graduated college, a couple guys approached me and said like, hey, we're going to do this alcohol delivery app. And I was doing another college startup at the time, so I was like, they're like, oh, maybe you should work on it with us. I was like, yeah. So that summer, six of us started working on this app called Drizzly, and we just did all the basics and kind of had the business plan and the logo and the website were kind of coming together. End of the summer comes around, I got to get a job. I have no money. I'm not, I just graduated school. I was like, I need to get a job. And so I went and took a job for $35,000 a year at a startup. Two of the guys went full time on this idea. And as you might know, they sold for $1 billion to Uber eventually. It's laughable right now, right? You're like 35K, like that was what you give. I needed that money, right? I needed to live. Those guys had some different situations where they could work on this full time and not have a job, which brings up a good question, which is like, how do you put yourself in a position to take risk? And so, for me, everyone has a different risk tolerance. For me, I needed to work at some companies and feel like I knew what I was doing for a few years. And I also needed to build up some savings for a few years. I just did not feel comfortable coming out of college. Even though the idea was great, I believed in it. I didn't feel comfortable at that point diving all in. And a few years later, what I ended up doing is I worked at Google. Then I went to a startup studio. I got really close to building companies. I felt like I knew how to build companies when I worked there. And I by that point I had saved up some money. I was married, so my wife worked for Google still. So we still had healthcare and some salary, right?
Nice.
So I was then in a position to take risk. And so that's when I took the plunge at maybe, I don't know, 29 or 30. But I look back on it, and even I think I waited a little bit too long, honestly. What was my first idea? It was a B2B startup idea. Why was that my first idea? I had experience in that space and I needed to make money. So I chose a quick to revenue idea. All of my ideas when I was 22 were fun consumer apps. That's why I got into building startups. And then all of a sudden, I'm running a B2B marketplace and I'm working on like billing automation. I'm like, what am I doing? Right? The only reason I started Pickleheads was because I sat down and I looked at all of this experience and I said, I think I understand the problem. I think that the people in their early 20s have the right ideas and they ride the wave of product market fit to success, even though they have no experience or skills yet. But if I, at age 35, take my experience and skills and I think like a 22-year-old in terms of what ideas I pursue, then I'll have that same experience, but I'll be able to do it even better because I know what I'm doing. And that is exactly, I believe, why we are where we are in terms of Pickleheads. I think we picked the right idea that was fun to work on, that gives me energy every day, that has the tailwinds of product market fit, that everyone I talk to understands and wants to talk to me about and wants to tell other people about. And then I think we have a team of experienced entrepreneurs who know what they're doing. And I think that combination is just lethal. But I would recommend to anybody, if they're in their 20s, to take the leap now because even I have all this experience, love what I do, love what we're building. I don't have the time I had when I was 22. That's the one thing I don't have anymore. I have a 2.5-year-old. I got another baby on the way. I cannot work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day anymore. So I'll leave you with that. That is my advice for anybody in your shoes is to take as much risk as possible as early as possible.
Max,
There you go.
I just appreciate you, man, for taking a chance on us to do this pod, even though it's not fully baked out yet, and being an early guest. And yeah, it's awesome to watch the growth of Pickleheads and you, and just it means a lot to have you in our corner. So I just appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was fun.
And for our audience, Max has actually been a big supporter of the fourth quarter, has been reading our newsletters and consistently gives us feedback. And that's why, it was my first time meeting Max, and I truly appreciate him for that as well. For anyone who wants to find their pickleball community and, swing that paddle and, learn the sport, definitely check out Pickleheads. It's honestly a great app.
Max,
Yes. And I'll just add, if you want to make $10,000 a month running pickleball events in your local area, come to Pickleheads and we have all the tools for you to do it.
you heard it here first, folks. Max, our next one's gonna be when the Series A happens.
Absolutely. It's inevitable.
I love it.
After you guys jump on board, become a part of the Pickleheads team,
I love it.
we're on our way to Series A.
I love it. I love it. Max, appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See ya.